immobilization, right? So, and then look at this temperature, pH, salinity, how the salinity change will impact that kind of growth of the microorganisms. It's also another important aspect. And then if you look at the algae blooming in the Great Salt Lake, and then they are actually could be using carbon dioxide, bicarbonate or carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And then how can we managing those algae blooming in the angle of carbon dioxide sequestration? That will be even that maybe deserve some time and effort. And plus those algae, maybe it's really good source of food. Also diesel. And then this is the this is the physical chemical process we could use. It's recently it's quite popular how to mining carbon dioxide from saline water. And then there are multiple ways, but this electrochemical process is quite popular, and then it's quite feasible at this moment. There are some issues in this technology, and then but I was working as a postdoc in this group, and we are quite familiar with this kind of electrochemical process. It's quite stable right now. And this is just a news I recently found online. South Korea, they're gonna do a very large plant scale carbon dioxide and excellent salt water demonstration, and even into the application. And then to me, I think this is the takeaway message. So right now we don't know it's carbon positive or carbon negative of GSL. And then we need to look at the carbon dioxide escape, and then the precipitate farming, and the in-lake biocaptures like wetlands and algae, something like that, and then also carbon dioxide dissolution process. And then the strategy for achieving these carbon negative, then how can we enhance those positive aspects and then minimize the negative aspects. And then if we can create out the carbon credits, we can achieve some carbon dioxide mineralization. Then I think it could be contribute to bring in the water to the lake right further. So, and then in the long go, stable desirable water level overall, and then also stable salinity level, and then a stable alkalinity level. With that, I would like to take any question if I can answer.
Okay. Anyone have questions in the room? Elliot?
Do we know how much CO2 is escaping from the lake itself? Like, has that been monitored by USGS in the past, or?
Yeah. So the data, that's the estimation is this one.
Right. But we haven't, we haven't like physically measured gassing CO2 from the lake, right?
Mm-hmm. You mean, what is that based on, that estimate?
This is based on the from the data from the Dead Sea.
And so just applying the same surface area?
Applied with the surface area.
Because I don't remember the depth to volume, the depth to area, ratio for Dead Sea, but obviously it's very small for a salt lake, right?
Yeah.
And by analogy, when we were looking at selenium, we found that because the lake is stirred so frequently, it exports selenium in the form of a volatile form called dimethylselenide or related forms. And so that's how it maintains a low level of selenium, relatively low level of selenium despite low humidity. And I suspect the same thing is kind of true of carbon dioxide, that the lake is stirred enough that equilibrium with the atmosphere probably drives processes in the lake, and it's more about tying the carbon dioxide to alkalinity. And so maybe the conceptual model that you're raising two things that I find interesting. One is there's a value of the lake in terms of carbon dioxide, right? That I haven't heard articulated all that much. And then second, that the inflows from the rivers and that processing of the margins of the lake is really important in terms of carbon sequestration. I think those are two really important points. Right? But I suspect that in the lake itself, there's more of an equilibrium process occurring through the stream.
Yeah, makes sense. The Dead Sea is like, well, it used to be 300 meters deep, but yeah. So I mean, it's a deeper rift basin, so a lot more volume vertically, harder to mix.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Could you go back to the part where you showed Utah's CO2 emissions overall?
Yeah.
And then could you say again what percentage you estimate the lake might contribute to that?
If you look at it, that's the total, right? 60 million tons of carbon dioxide. And then within that, commercial and the residential, this is the residential and this is the commercial.
It's hard
And
to
then
see
it's about three.
three.
It's about three commercial, and then it's 4.5 for residential. And then if we do good job, or if the data I'm right now interpreting is correct, it's about 0.4 the GSL will contribute to the immobilization process. So it's about 10% of that,
Of residential.
of the residential and of commercial.
Tiny fraction of the overall output.
Yeah, you could say
60 million tons compared to 0.4 million tons.
60. Yeah, I mean, it's overall, it's not so big.
But when compared to our residential output, it's
It's
On
still
the same-
limited. It's also just a 10% of that. But yeah, that's kind of you didn't really take in those wetlands contribution, lake, algae growing stuff. If we do a good job managing those kind of, there's a hope, I think. But that's already a good sign. Like if we can approve that's the case, you're mobilizing, the lake is able to mobilizing carbon dioxide. That's good, right? Instead of releasing carbon dioxide back to the atmosphere.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Amy. It looks like Scott left a comment online. I don't think that's a question, but I can make sure that gets to you.
Mhm.
Thanks so much. Next, we have Sam, who a lot of you are already familiar with, presenting on his tech team grant from fiscal year 23 on modeling the flow through the West Crack Reach to aid adaptive management of Great Salt Lake. So, Tom, thanks for speaking again for us. Are you good to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay.
Can't share. Yeah.
Were you able to get you were in this one. That works.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. So I'm presenting to the tech team after about a couple of years. So I'm Swam Datta, and with me is my team from Utah State, Professor Brian Crookston from CE and the Water Lab, and a couple of graduate students, Diana Dunn and Eric Larson. One of the graduate students who has also contributed is not present here because from Salota. And again, thanks to all the collaboration with USGS, Christine, Ryan, Scott, Andy, Mike, Without them, this work is not possible, and also contributions from inputs from Utah DNR's Craig Miller and Laila Ahmadi, and of course, discussions with Jeff Denblaker, Professor Bill Johnson, and Professor Wayne Wadsworth. So with that, what we'll be talking about today is giving you an update of, we have been going after modeling the flow through, I call it West Craig Breach, but I was reminded we should call it maybe the new Causeway Breach. And we have been trying to model that for a while, and we have developed different models over the years. So I will give you an update on that and how we are trying all this effort to basically aid the adaptive management of the Great Salt Lake. And along with that, before we get into the modeling aspect of it, Diana will give a presentation of, in the last 1 year, she has been interpreting the salinity data, which has been measured historically, and trying to find some patterns within it, and what we are trying to do with that in collaboration with Christine from USGS. So with that, Diana, you take over, and then I will get back.
Well, hi everyone. Again, I'm Diana. I'm a graduate student working with Brian and Sam at USU. And I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about the data analysis that I've done on historical salinity going back to 2017 within the south arm of the Great Salt Lake, and some of the implications that analysis may have on current lake modeling and salinity studies. So really, since 2017, there's been a bit of an increase in monitoring salinity at the lake. However, a lot of available data sets aren't being incorporated into current models or salinity studies because of the uncertainty that we have with combining multiple data sets. So the main question that we have within this study is just if we can improve current lake modeling by using all of this available data. So really the main contribution will be development of a specific conductance conversion equation that's applicable for salinity levels within the south arm, and also compiling and using all of these available salinity data sets to inform the development of a physics-based mass balance model that uses all this available data and also incorporates a lot of the really great exchange flow modeling that Brian and Eric have been doing. So with that, the first thing that we did was we looked at what data was available, and for us, we compiled data from the GS database, the USGS available data on NWIS, DWIR's Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program data that we accessed through a grant request, along with the published HDR monitoring that they performed as part of their bridge construction project, and then also the data that Phil Brown and the Brandship Cooperative included as SI in the publication put out back in 2022. So this total data set combines observations of density, specific gravity, specific conductance, percent salinity, and also salinity derived from conductivity meter readings. We applied various conversion equations to get at one cohesive data set of salinity in grams per liter. So with that, we were looking from January 2017 to January 2023, and how we got these observations of salinity that I've plotted up on the graph on the left, which is just a time series from 2017 to 2023. Each observation represents the average through the upper brine layer if there is a profile measurement that was taken during a sampling event. We calculated that using the USGS depth to deep brine layer data that Christine and Ryan so kindly provided us. So in total, again, within the period of analysis, we saw data from 26 different sampling sites, about 3,280 observations of upper brine layer average salinity. And so when we're looking at this graph, we see a continuous seasonal pattern in lower salinity levels that generally isn't occurring between July and October when the climate is really dry and there's lower inflow volume to the lake. And that's indicated by the orange shaded regions within the graph. And with talking with Christine and Ryan at the USGS, we know that there's multiple occasions at sites where they monitor regularly where inflows from Bear River Bay and also Farmington Bay are protruding into the South Arm and are fully mixing at those sites. So to filter out those observations, we decided to remove data from site 2200, 2267, 2767, and also 2583, which I've circled on the map there, and are indicated by the star symbols within the plot. That ended up being about 151 observations that we filtered out, which is about 5% of the data set. However, that still left about 40 outliers of significantly lower salinity. And this occurred across 7 different sites, and there was no regular pattern through space or time. So we decided to leave those within our data because we couldn't really attribute those to any defined persistent lake dynamics. So with this filtered compiled data set, we still see a decent amount of spread through the central trend included by those gray observation points within the time series. So what we wanted to do was to understand how much of that spread is attributed to combining data from various sampling locations versus combining the actual data sets with different field and analytical methods. So we performed some uncertainty analysis within this data set. The first thing that we did was we subsetted the global data into 3 different sets. One is salinity derived from specific conductance, from density, and from percent salinity. What we did was within each subset, we literally interpolated between sampling events at each of those sites to get a daily salinity value. And then we calculated the daily standard deviation across those sites through each subset to be able to understand, given data derived from a specific parameter, what are the differences within the lake and the space. And so we performed a error propagation analysis. We took a root mean square error approach, and we found that there's about 6.8 grams per liter standard deviation that we could expect within the total compiled data set on a given day that can be attributed to combining it from various sampling locations. And we took a very similar approach to isolate the uncertainty that we find from combining multiple data sets derived from different proxy measurements. So to do that, we just took the data from 2565 up in Carrington Bay and also 3510 in Gilbert Bay to understand what spread that we're seeing from combining data from specific conductance, density, and percent salinity. So on average, that period of analysis, there is about a 5 gram per liter standard deviation, which is about 4% of the average salinity that we were seeing during this time. So really, what is the application of that? Given the 2 sources of uncertainty that we have, multiple sampling locations, different field and analytical methods, we determined about a 10 gram per liter standard deviation within the compiled data set. So given a 90% confidence interval, that means that the median salinity that we calculated for every day that is indicated in the gray line on the plot is representative of any point within the south arm plus or minus about 18 grams per liter. Now, that's a very high amount of variability. It's about 10 to 20% of the salinity levels that generally occur within a given year during the south arm. So what we wanted to do was raise the question of what's truly representative and what data should we be feeding models and not for salinity studies. So what we did was we wanted to compare this representative median salinity to data that's commonly used within the Great Salt Lake Integrated Model and other things that are being done at the lake. And so when we compare salinity versus median salinity, which are the 2 plots up on the left, at site 3510 and 2565, they tend to overrepresent salinity in the south arm when compared to the median that we calculated. And really just using that combined with the results from this uncertainty analysis, we know that when we're just using data from 1 or 2 sites within the south arm, it can vary upwards of plus or minus 11 grams per liter, which again, it's a pretty large amount of variability when we're averaging through space. So what that suggests is that using a volume-weighted average to develop a representative south arm salinity could potentially improve some of the estimates we're getting from our models. And then another thing to note as well from this uncertainty analysis is that when we combine data derived from the 3 main parameters monitored at the lake, it introduces again another 9 grams per liter of uncertainty within our salinity values for the south arm. So that just really emphasizes the need to coordinate field and analytical methods, which is already being done, and coordinating sampling locations, because that will really serve to increase the temporal resolution of the data and minimize some of the interpolation needed to get at a daily or monthly salinity value within the south arm, and also would decrease the uncertainty that's introduced when we have to combine data from a variety of different sources and proxy measurements. So really the main takeaways from this study that we've determined is that we can combine salinity data sets, but it's necessary to filter to get a representative south arm salinity value. We can also combine multiple data sets, but that introduces uncertainty, which we quantified. However, using this compiled salinity time series that we have, it's really necessary to use that with an understanding of the variability that comes with that data set, but also knowing that we can subset the compiled data to meet whatever the goals of its application are. And then finally, we've also determined that using a volume-weighted self-harm model where we're breaking it up into bays instead of just averaging through space and through the upper brine layer may be a better way to represent the self-harm within different models and studies. So where we're going with that, as Sam mentioned, using the tools that we've developed in this study along with the West Crook Breach exchange flow modeling, we're going to be using these tools to develop a physics-based mass balance model of the self-harm that will be capable of altering the berm heights and also hydrologic conditions. And with that, we plan to run management scenarios and compare those results to our representative salinity time series to be able to better quantify how the berm can be used to adaptively manage salinity for a variety of hydrologic conditions we may be seeing in the future, and ultimately be able to develop some hopefully helpful management strategies. So that's everything that we're currently working on and the end goal, and I think I'll be passing this off to Sam now to talk about some of the West Crook Breach modeling.
So if you guys have any questions, you can quickly ask them, or you can hold it till I end my part of the presentation, whichever you guys prefer.
Maybe let's wait till
Okay.
we're all done. Yeah.
So now what I'm going to quickly give you an overview of where we are about modeling the exchange flow at the breach, which we call the new causeway breach. And because that point has been found to be the main point of exchange between the north and the south side, and has increasingly become very important for adaptive management with the increase and decrease in the berm being made pretty aggressively as we go on. So what has the modeling tools which has been used till date mostly has been which was developed in 1976 by Professor Ed Holley, and it basically is a gradually varying flow-based model, which basically takes in the water surface elevation of the north and the south, and the density of the two sides, and gives you a value of the flow between the two sides. What it does not account for very easily and in a physics informed manner is the change in berm height. And again, that model was developed back in the days for a culvert, was adapted for the new breach. But what I will talk about by the end of this presentation is how we are taking it to the next level. We call it Holley 2.0. Currently, what we have is in the last 3 years of work, we have developed multiple CFD models, which has helped us interpret the physics of the flow. And then it has also helped us to talk about, so this is the CFD model. It's basically not getting into the too many details of it because some of you might have seen this earlier. But what this model allowed was that it helped us not just understand the flow. A couple of years back, when the decision of raising the berm was first being discussed, this CFD model was able to tell us what kind of berm height increase would actually stop all the north to south flow. And we were pretty happy that kind of estimates we gave panned out pretty correctly. Now, what we have done till then, everything we had done, apart from the 0 feet berm, nothing was built till 2022, right? The first time the berm was raised to the 4 feet height was in July 2022. So since then, we had more measurements from USGS, which basically told us, and I'm showing a couple of comparisons, which is telling us that the model is still performing well as we raise the berm, and that means basically for the 4 feet berm. What we have also done is we have run a bunch of simulations for the 6 feet berm, from which we are making rating curves. And we will talk about how we have used the CFD data not only to inform the physics, but we have used it to come up with something what we call a dynamic rating curve. And we don't at this point of time have enough CFD runs for the 4 feet berm to create a rating curve out of it. But the results I will show next for the 0 feet berm rating curve gives us hope that this method will essentially work also for all the other berm heights. So what we did was we took the CFD data and we used simple Bernoulli's theorem. And what we said was we came up with an estimate for height of the interface based on the density of the water on both sides of the lake, the density difference. And then we added a couple of correction factors, dynamic correction factors based on average velocity of the flow through the breach. Now, you might ask that that information is not readily available, say in something like a GSLIM model. But what we did was, that's why we call it a dynamic rating curve, because we used a fixed point iterative method to basically start with a zero estimate of velocity, and we were able to converge to the correct values. And what we did was we basically first used the CFD data to come up with the coefficients, CN and CS. And when we tested that rating curve with the measured monthly measurements from USGS, it did okay, not very well compared to the what we call the benchmark, which we have to improve upon, that is the 1D Ed Hawley's model. But we took that method, and what we said is, okay, instead of using the CFD data, what if we come up with CN and CS from all the measurements we have at the breach? And this data is essentially all the data which came out of a model we will talk about later, what we call the index ANN model, which was used by Christine for her salt balance modeling she has been doing. So when we took that, we came up with new coefficients based on the optimization method. And then when we took that, and if you see the two plots, so this is on the left-hand side is Q north to south, and the right-hand side is discharge south to north. And what we see is we are actually predicting with this dynamic rating curve, our prediction is almost as good as what we are getting for the 1D model. Now, what you might say that, but it's as good, why not better? What we are planning is that essentially, because we have a lot more data, and what we show through this method is that these values could be tunable. So the next thing what we are doing is tuning these further using machine learning so that we can get a better estimate of CN and CS so that we can go further beyond. And for this method working for the 0 feet berm shows us that as we go ahead for the 4 feet and 6 feet, this method will work for that. And
So what are the axes?
So on the y-axis is the model predicted measurement, and x-axis is what is measured by USGS. So the 45-degree line is like when you have.
Probably said that. Sorry. Thank you.
So apart from that, one of the success stories has been what we call the index ANN, in which basically what we have used machine learning, and to it we feed the velocities at 10 different levels measured at the breach by the USGS uplooker. And that essentially then helps us predict the flow to the north and flow to the south. And when we trained it and tested it, it got really high R squared. And then this model, we had so much faith in it that we basically passed on the data predicted by that model to Christine for her salt balance calculations she has been doing. And as you might know, that it did help her calculation to gain more fidelity, because we could give it almost daily prediction of north to south flow and south to north flow through the breach. And on the top plot, what I'm showing is essentially a prediction by the 1D model, that is Ed Hawley's model, versus the index ANN. And what you see is till a certain stage, or till a certain value of discharge, that is around till say 2,000-3,000 CFS, Ed Hawley's model actually does comparable to these more methods like the ANN. But as we go on to higher discharges, it starts to disperse away from it. So so this is one of the questions, is especially when we have these cases in which we have weather events, when a lot of flow go either north to south or south to north through the breach. This is when the current model which are implemented in GStream, like the Ed Holly's model, those stop working because it does not account for these really large transients. So the question is now, how can we take the ANN models and the models we will talk about next and couple it with GStream? That's one of the big next questions, which continuously, whenever I ask Craig, and I don't know if Craig is here, whenever I ask Craig, what next, he said, okay, let's couple these to GStream. So I'm not going to talk about the other ANN models, but quickly, the other new stuff we have is what we call generalized area-based index model, or GABI. And this is basically taking the uplooker data, and instead of putting it inside a black box called an artificial neural network, what we do is we do a more physics-based method in which we are just taking the velocity and multiplying with the area of cross-section. Fidelity of this model will improve as we bring in data from the new uplooker, which USGS has up there, which has velocities not just at 10 levels, but at up to 50 levels. And when we take that model, and the good thing about the GABI model is it works for all kind of berm heights. It does not matter if it's 0 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet, any berm height, we can use GABI. If we have the velocity data or have an estimate of it, we can use it to give us a good estimate of the flow. And what we did was we checked GABI against measurements when we had not just a 0 feet berm, but 4 feet berm. And what we find is, so we had the raw model had an NSE of 0.4, which is not that good. But then we have an adjusted version of the model, which is giving us the NSE of around 0.6 to 0.7, depending on which direction we are estimating, flow at which direction we are estimating. And finally, what is we are currently working on, and the future is essentially reimagining and re-implementing Ed Holly, but accounting for the berms. So this is a quick, brief overview I will give. What we are doing is, original Ed Holly's model first only used a rectangular cross-section and essentially modeled the whole breach as in a one go. In order to account for the berm, what we are doing is we are breaking up the domain into 3 parts: flow at the interface of the flow over the berm, and then before and after. And we have re-derived the equations according to that. And what we are going through is, and also we have in the new version of the model, we are including a trapezoidal cross-section, which is akin to the cross-section we actually have in the breach. So going forward, we will be able to account for the berm, and it will be for any berm height. So this model, and the idea is, unlike the CFD model, which takes 2 weeks to run one case, this model will be like the current model you guys have at GSlim, should be able to give you an answer within a minute or within a few seconds, but accounting for the berm height with proper physics. So with that, basically just a conclusion that this is what we talk about the present and the near future, and talking about next year and way ahead. Something I just heard at the start of the meeting was the whole uncertainty about what the Bear River is doing and how it is not mixing well. So maybe the next thing, while we are wrapping up the causeway breach, the next big modeling focus most probably has to be, of course, with collaboration with ESGS, is about what is happening at the Bear River Bay Bridge and trying to understand the flow and where the water from there is going, so that we can understand the routing in the south side better. With that, any questions, please, both for Diana and me?
Thank you, Sam, Diana. Does anyone have any questions in the room?
Yeah. So thanks, nice presentation. And I just want to ask about, you use a spatial filter, you filtered out certain sites. But those other outliers had a temporal component, right? You could see when they were.
Yeah.
And probably reflect that channel going in to Carrington Bay.
Mhm.
Why not put a temporal filter on there too? To say, okay, we know that that inflow is channeled into Carrington Bay. Why not remove them on that basis? And they're my plan. Would that be a possibility?
I think that would. My struggle with that was seeing it across sites within the South Arm. So there was a few observations where salinity was higher. So back in 2021, we saw some observations of higher salinity, which was occurring at the sites just barely south of where Bear River comes in, which was confusing. And then there's also, lower salinity values also within Carrington Bay itself as well.
Exactly, and that's where that channel goes.
Yeah.
So Carrington Bay gets this freshwater-ish channel. Therefore, we don't want to use those points at that time, right, during the max inflow. Those higher salinity ones are pockets, right? The whole deep Rhinelander thing is a pocket filling process. And those pockets that you have south of N1018 are those.
Yeah.
These ephemeral, what are now ephemeral points. So you actually have a physiographic basis and a timed temporal basis for saying, okay, we don't want to average these particular things. I'd encourage you to use that.
Yeah.
Because we know a lot about what's driving those points.
Okay.
And then you mentioned volume averaging done by Christine, or you didn't. You mentioned volume averaging needs to be done. Christine did do volume averaging, but both bays treated as one body.
Yeah.
And I think what you're suggesting is, okay, let's separate Carrington and Gilbert. And I think that the big rationale for that is, in fact, the channel moving in. And so if you filter those out, then I don't know that you need to do separation of the two bays. But time will tell.
Okay. And I think there's an important point that Diana's finding in her research is to do a more accurate physics-driven salt balance model. It's very data hungry, and we don't have enough data. Even if you combine all of the data sets, which she's doing, and quantifying the uncertainty, we still don't have enough data. So the hope is that Diana's model will be handed off to either this group or USGS so that it can be used. But part of what she's doing is she's trying to quantify for all of us what additional insights do we need so that we decrease our uncertainties and our estimates. Because if we're off by 50% with our salt mass, that's really difficult from a management perspective. So how do we tighten that up so that we're able to make better proactive decisions?
And to addition to that, I think the point Diana made about separating the two bays, because at this point of time when we are doing a complete volume, like doing the salt balance for the whole South Arm, what we get as one value may not be representative of the two or three parts of the lake on the south side. So maybe something which basically we do not need to have a very complicated model, but something which accounts for the three bays separately or two bays separately. Maybe we should try to do the filtering and it might help, but even despite that, I think maybe some sort of a multi-bay sort of a model might be the next step.
And I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying, look, there's a temporal aspect of when Carrington has that freshwater channel in it. So, it's partly recognizing the difference in the bays, but also recognizing the temporal aspect. So I'm not disagreeing with your approach more than as much as saying, hey, recognize that we do know a lot about what's driving those.
Yeah, that was definitely a gap in the knowledge that I had. So thank you for your.
Yeah. And I'm worried. I mean, we don't have enough data on salinity, which we have actually a lot of. We should be able to use what we have because we have it streaming into the USGS, UGS, and other entities. I think there's good hope that we can have a good predictive model, and it makes me wonder, like, how far. So, your artificial neural network, Sean. You mentioned it needs to account for these transient events, and particularly sessions, right, where you get a wind-driven wedge of water moving to one side of the lake, and it creates a situation where you pile up all of the shallow brine against the causeway, and therefore that's what's going on. Or likewise, if you pile up all of the shallow brine on the south arm, it's deep brine that gets, if it exists, pushed to the causeway. And so that's hard to take into account because it's not part of your normal, counter current flow.
Yeah.
But it is possible to account for it. And so I do think that, yes, tying to G-SLIM makes some sense, but it's wind that primarily determines these events, and tying it to wind speed may actually be a faster, more simple approach to doing this, because we've played with such as in the past in terms of understanding through temperature profiles how they control, do they cause mixing in the lake, basically is the question we were trying to answer. And not so much, it's more about wedging the water one direction or the other. And it's pretty easy to see what happens in response to the wind speed. So you might have a faster pathway by looking at wind speed. Not to say you don't tie to G-SLIM, but I think there is a fast path.
So you make a really good point about the wind speed, because I did not show this, but when we made the ANN model, and we made two versions of it, one with the wind data and one without the wind data, and immediately when you have the wind data, the model's predictions gets better.
Yeah, and in direction too, right?
Right.
There's a matter of
Wind
which
data,
direction.
wind speed and direction.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, the wind is playing a major role, and it shows up with the ANN model.
Yeah.
Your real intelligence is showing what you're saying is what the artificial intelligence is saying.
And so I do wonder, how far does all this go before you can start accounting for big things we don't know, like groundwater inflow, right? And other things that are going to reasonably impact things within plus or minus 10%. And so I think we should just keep that in mind, that there's also these bigger things that we haven't constrained well yet that could have the impacts that you're talking about in terms of accuracy.
Well, wind was a good segue. Sorry, I just want to make sure we have time for the other items in our
I'll shut up now.
Sorry, Christine. So speaking of wind, Tim Davis, our Deputy Great Salt Lake Commissioner, is here to have a discussion on dust and dust research. So Tim, I will hand you the.
I thought it was hot air.
Yeah, I thought you were
I thought that was hot air rather than dust. Hi, everybody. I haven't met you. This is Tim Davis. I'm the Deputy Great Salt Lake Commissioner. It's my second tech team. I'm happy to be told I have. So this will be pretty quick. I've talked with a number of conversations that I've had with USGS, with a number of the divisions. I want to propose, and I want to give people's feedback here, to pull together under the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office a dust forum. I'm looking in May, and one of the reasons for that is there's a lot of work going on dust. There's a lot of different groups working on it, but it sounds to me that it would be useful to get everybody's working on dust from a university, from a regulatory, from a federal, state perspective, to sit down and talk about what research is going on, what research is needed, what are the gaps, what funding is out there, and what additional funding is needed. And that it would be I'm not talking about creating a big ongoing process, but more a forum that maybe, if it's successful, we can renew. But one of the goals and one of the responsibilities of the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office is better coordination. We also, one of the key provisions of the Great Salt Lake Strategic Plan is both better coordination and making sure we have the best available science. And as we're moving forward with implementing the plan, we really need to make sure that we fully understand what's in the dust, who's at risk of it, where there might be hotspots, what we can do to mitigate it. All of those, we need to. The public deserves to have those answers, and we need to have it to figure out where we should be focusing our resources as a state and with federal partners and others. So I am, unless I see thumbs down or people tell me it's a terrible idea, it's unnecessary, I see one thumb up, two. And I'm thinking, Department of Health, the different divisions that are involved at DNR, DEQ, Division of Air Quality, USGS, UGS, USU, and the U, and then anyone else. I have reached out to CARE to see if there's interest. That I heard that they were going to be doing something on dust, but they haven't gotten back to me at this time. I was thinking that I would steal an email list that Molly gave me, but use that to invite anybody who's interested, keep it, and to pull together a team to help develop an agenda and make sure that we're inviting the right people. So again, I'm not planning to make this into a huge thing but first just let's figure out what we're doing, what we need to do, and how we get it done. So related to this. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? I heard something online.
Just a thumbs up from Annie.
Okay. Thanks, Annie.
Would it be coordinated with Great Salt Lake issues?
Yeah. So we can certainly coordinate around that. When's the
May 8th, 9th, and 10th.
okay? Yeah, we can coordinate around that. I don't know if we can talk about how and when is best to. Any thumbs down? Any? Okay. If anybody's interested in being part of working with me on putting together the agenda, let me just ask you to email me after this meeting. I know Willie, we've talked a little bit, Molly and others. So if you're interested, there's other people that are interested. Just let me know. I want to make this as streamlined as possible and get the right people around the room, and really making an open dialogue. So yeah, if you're interested, anyone online too, please email me and let me know that you're interested in being part of a team to pull together the agenda and make sure we've got the right people invited. And my email is tdavis3@utah.gov. So any other questions or comments at this point? All right. Thanks, Bronson.
Thank you, hot-winded Tim. That was excellent, and we're definitely excited for that. I think we've had a lot of great dust discussions in this meeting, and I think kind of putting that all together in one space is going to be really beneficial. So definitely looking forward to that. Count us on board. So with that, I'll open up the floor to any other member updates, issues, announcements, research, anything anyone wants to announce. Now is your time to take the floor. Cricket. Anyone online have any announcements? Okay. So with that, yes, Keith, hello.
I just wanted to give some updates for Phragmites numbers. We have finished 1,500 acres of trampling outside of Howard Slough WMA, and almost 1,800 acres of mowing and trampling outside of the Central Davis Sewer District outflow. And then our contractors are now moving to, one is going to the Willard Spur, and then another contractor will be working adjacent to Farmington Bay WMA, making its way west from the Central Davis outflow.
Awesome. Thank you to our Frag King. Does anyone have any comments, questions related to Keith's frag work? I'm full of words today. I don't know. Spicy words. Great. Thanks, Keith, for sharing with us. Are there any other updates, announcements?
I'll just reiterate the Friends of Great Salt Lake 2024 Great Salt Lake Issues Forum, May 8th, 9th, and 10th. And many of you are already on the program, but for those of you who aren't on the program, I hope you'll be there in the audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Looking forward to that as well. So if no one has any further comments, our next tech team meeting will be May 14th in this room. And yeah, good luck with your research proposals, and please reach out to me with any questions about anything. I'm more than happy to help you out. And thanks for being here.
Yeah.